Good afternoon. Well, it's Saturday, and it's in the 30s, and I'm thinking, as I've been out a little bit, that I might have been smarter to put something on my head, but otherwise I'm pretty warm. It's gray day. So what do we have worth talking about? I was on with Ari Melber last night on MSNBC on The Beat, and we discussed an issue I've gotten some questions about. Now, it seemed that most people understood where I was going, but not everybody did, and the time is a little short, so let me go over a couple of things that you might find interesting. This is the way I see the Mar-a-Lago thing. If I'm the government and I've gotten word from the archives that the president has documents that are classified and that are contraband and are illegal to have, I at the archives asked the Department of Justice, so-called, to get on the case and to get us those documents, because this is not acceptable. People go to prison immediately for having one document, for sneaking something out in their jacket or pants pocket. But we have Trump, who ignores all rules and laws and the Constitution and lies about what he does. Okay, so but if I'm prosecuting this case and I get this from the archives, I first call up and say, where the hell are the documents? And they give me a line of bullshit, and so then I issue a subpoena. I want everything that you've got in this category. Now, admitting it is a crime, that you have them at all. So how does that happen? Does somebody in justice assure them, look, we're not going to prosecute, we just want the documents? I mean, what is that conversation? And who do you make the subpoena out to? I make it out to Trump. And under the Presidential Records Act, he's the one who's responsible for presidential records, and he was responsible to hand them over, not somebody else, not some subcomponent or it was him. He's supposed to hand it over, and we have reason to believe that he has these things in Mar-a-Lago and perhaps other places. So we issue a subpoena, and there's a lot of BS back and forth, and they produce some documents, and we want a certification that these are all the documents. So who do they get? They get Christina Bobb. Now, Christina Bobb is not the custodian of records. She's not responsible for the records. She knows nothing about the records. So why is Trump offering her up as the custodian? Because he doesn't want to be in the problem responsible himself. He wants somebody else to be responsible, but he's the one who's responsible. And she signs a document that's not truthful or accurate. And she also knows she was not the custodian of documents. And Ari last night rightly said, people think we're talking about custodian and documents and stuff like that. This is just process. It's not just process, because these documents are classified. These present certain threats to our security and the security of our allies and our methods and ways and a whole variety of things. And so it's very important. They are to be thought of, as Ari said last night, contraband. So the Justice Department that doesn't want to put Trump's name on it and doesn't want to chase Trump is prepared to deal with a bogus custodian who was not a custodian of any records before they asked her to sign a document. And who asked her to sign the document? And the person who asked her to sign the document is a lawyer who's working for Trump. Now, we go down this path and we find out, even after she signs this document as the custodian, which she is not, they have tapes and so forth suggesting there are still more documents there. Now, at this point, a real prosecutor does two things, in my opinion. One, he holds Trump in contempt of the subpoena for his failure to produce all the documents and takes his ass to court right away. 2, he also holds Ms. Bob in contempt for making a false statement that she was the custodian when she was not. Now, it's a harder case to say that she's the appropriate party because she was never a custodian, but she withheld that. So her offense may be misleading the government. Now, we're going back to June or whatever. Now, these guys, supposedly prosecutors, continue to talk to the Trump people, say, well, please let us have the rest of the documents, you know. And then finally, they get up the nerve to conduct a search warrant and find another 100. And days ago, we find 2. So what happened in court when the Department of Justice asked to hold in contempt somebody? Well, apparently they wanted to. They didn't know what they wanted, because they wanted lawyers to be held responsible for what Trump is truly responsible, because he's the only person who is there's that process word, custodian, holder, theft, the crook who took the documents from the White House in violation of a variety of laws and has since obstructed the investigation using Ms. Bob and other people to do so. So why did Justice lose the contempt citation yesterday? Because they wanted the judge to punish the lawyers who were never custodians and couldn't say that they knew where all the documents were. But if they had sought the contempt of one, Mr. Trump, who is the true custodian, unlawfully the custodian, the illegal custodian of basically contraband, then if I were the judge, I'd say, okay, we should have an order to show cause why he shouldn't be held in contempt, because we issued a subpoena and he's had the documents since, including those in his office. So what am I faulting? I'm faulting the Justice Department for not talking about the real crook here, which is Trump. I fault the court for perhaps not having the nerve to go forward. I fault the court for saying to the parties, why don't you go work it out? Well, that's the end of that. How are two parties that don't agree on anything going to, quote, work it out? So if you start something badly, what do you do about it? You go back and correct it. And how would I correct it? I would correct it by issuing an order to show cause why Trump he shouldn't be held in contempt. And I'd perhaps file a complaint against Bob for what she did. But you see, it's hands off when it comes to Trump and his criminals. Well, I went on longer than I wanted to. Another thing that's interesting is Sinema, the senator who would not go along with the caucus on various issues, and now has announced herself as an independent. I figure this is the beginning of her two-step. Step 1, become an independent. Step 2, become a Republican in time for the 2024 Senate race. So what's the Democratic answer to that? Get yourself a really good Democrat. Try to avoid a primary. Start your battle now. Or you can regret at leisure that you can't get a senator like Kelly from Arizona to fill the position of this worthless Senator Sinema. But that's just me. There's another interesting story about how this guy, Reverend Rob Schenck, says that Alito leaked information on the Hobby Lobby case years ago, and how he and others were trying to make the Supreme Court justices who were conservative more comfortable. Now, the Republicans went after this guy. I don't have a dog in the race in the sense of knowing who's right and who's wrong, and I don't even know how he's called to testify, but it's a real beaut. And then since Arizona is on my mind, Kari Lake is suing to win the election that she lost. If you can't win it at the ballot box, try a courtroom. And these people, there's no humiliation or shame. They will just do things. We have a nation of Republican grifters, and we have a nation of cowardly Democrats. We have them in the Justice Department, we have them in the White House, we have them on the Hill. You can't win the argument you do not make. And we're not making the argument. We're not making the argument against Trump in court. The Department of Justice shies away from a confrontation with the powers and rules they have to stop the contraband in Florida and to prosecute cases elsewhere. We have courts that are being charged with deciding elections that have no errors in them, no fraud, because it's become politics to say these things. So that's what I have in mind now. One personal note, it was a kick to go to the studios. Ari's not usually in DC, but he comes down occasionally. And the last time I appeared with him, he was in DC, and that's months ago. And it's all masks until we get on camera. And we keep a distance. And the people there are very careful about what they do. But it's still a different kind of conversation when you're in person with somebody who enjoys arguing, basically. And I think Ari and I have a pretty friendly way of arguing. I enjoy the meetings. You know, some people say he interrupts me, but I think the interruptions, as they're called, are really questions about what you just said that may not be clear to somebody that you're talking to, including however many people watch Ari's show. So I don't take umbrage at it. I like Ari. I trust his judgment. And so that's why I enjoy being on his show. So here I am in the Cathedral of Trees, and I've noticed that the color that I am seems to be matching more and more the background. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.